Okay, now, Chris, to you. I'm just about out of breath here. I've been talking now for a while, but Chris and I have been friends for a long time, and Chris he was a writer for a couple of different congressmen, and of course, entailed in that, he had to do a lot of history and follow through with a lot of different things. And I called him this morning and I said, let's do a show about the Founding Fathers, because I think maybe this is something people need to understand a little bit better. So, Chris, I'm going to let you take it away. There's a lot of I know you probably got 3 or 4 inches of papers in front of you because you probably worked all morning on it. So let's get started. Where do we want to start with?
Well, I certainly do my research, just like I did when I wrote speeches for a congressman on Capitol Hill. So it's never wise to shoot from the hip. It's always good to do your research. So this is what I have. There were 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. It was completed on July 2nd of 1776 and released to the public, much like a press release, on July 4th. The first person to sign the Declaration of Independence was John Hancock. And if you notice, he had the largest signature on the Declaration because he wanted the king to be able to make out his name clearly. What happened was John Hancock was a very wealthy man. He earned his own wealth through hard work, and the king ordered his home, John Hancock's home, to be taken over and used for the British military, their headquarters. So Hancock resented that his beautiful home was taken over by the British and used as a headquarters for the British military. So he was a holdout. He didn't want to join the cause of the revolution, not until they took his home. And then he made sure his signature was larger than life so that the king would know that he signed it. Okay, so of these 56 men who bravely signed the Declaration of Independence, declaring their independence from the British Empire, these are the sacrifices and sufferings they endured, okay? 11 signers of the Declaration of Independence had their homes destroyed by the British Empire. 5 were hunted down and captured. 17 served in the colonial military and then died. 9 of them died during the war. 27-year-old George Walton at the Battle of Savannah was wounded and captured. Signers of the Declaration, Edward Rutledge, age 27, Thomas Hayward Jr., age 30, and Arthur Middleton, age 34, were made prisoners at the siege of Charleston. 38-year-old Thomas Nelson had his home used, also another man who had his home used as British headquarters. During the siege of Yorktown, in this case, they used his home. So he was so upset that it's been reported that Nelson, he offered 5 guineas to anyone, that's a currency. He would give them money to the first man who hit his house with cannon fire. He was willing to destroy his house in order to destroy the British headquarters that was set up in his house.
Now
he was rumored to pay people. I'm sorry?
That was at Charleston?
That was at Yorktown.
Yorktown, okay.
Yeah, so he said, first person that hits my house with a cannon fire, I'll give you 5 guineas. Now, I don't know what that currency of a guinea would translate today compared to $1, but it was some kind of currency. Carter Braxton, age 40, lost his fortune during the war.
Yes.
42-year-old Thomas McKean wrote that he was hunted like a fox by the British, and he had to relocate his family 5 times in a 3-month period because they were hunting him down. 46-year-old Richard Stockton signed and was dragged from his bed at night and jailed. 50-year-old Lewis Morris had his home taken and used as barracks. Again, the British Empire commonly took over people's homes and used them for their military campaigns. 50-year-old Abraham Clark had 2 sons tortured and imprisoned on the British prison ship, the Jersey, where many Americans starved to death. It was such deplorable conditions. These prison ships were so deplorable, many Americans died on these ships from starvation.
Well,
In
yes,
fact,
because like
I'm sorry.
Yes, because like in the War of 1812, when that's what the writer of the not the Declaration of Independence, but the Star Spangled Banner, that's what his mission was. He was sent to one of the ships to help get prisoners released, and he ended up staying on the ship that night. But that was
Right,
War of 18.
and that's
That was
when
a
he
War of
wrote.
1812. But go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, you're right. And that's when he wrote down what happened and turned it into the
Star
Spangled
Spangled
Banner.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
Francis Scott Key. Go ahead.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But here's the statistic that really matters. More Americans died on the British prison ships than those who died during battles in the Revolution. More Americans or colonial Americans died on the British prison ships by way of starvation. So more starved to death on these British prison ships than actually died in battle. That's how bad it was on these ships. It was like a dungeon. Terrible. Disease and rats infested these ships, and people starved to death. Amazing. And these people refused to go back on their word. If you're starving to death, most people would say, hey, I surrender. They did not. They'd rather die than turn against the cause of the revolution. 53-year-old John Witherspoon's son, James, was killed in battle in Germantown. That would be Maryland. 60-year-old Philip Livingston lost several properties to British occupation. Again, the British took over his homes and his properties. And then he died before the war ended. 63-year-old Francis Lewis had his wife imprisoned, and she was treated so harshly by the British, she died after she was released. And they must have beat her pretty badly, and probably, very possibly, could have made her starve like on the prison ships. 65-year-old John Hart had his home looted and had to remain in hiding, and he died before the war ended. So these are the pains and the sacrifices, including starving to death on a dungeon, basically a dungeon contained within a British prison ship with rats and disease, and they starved to death. This is what these people endured in order to have a revolution and start a new country and break from the king, break from the monarchy. Incredible sacrifice, John.
What I want to say is, how do we reflect upon this in today's society? I mean, at that time, there was less than 3% that actually fought in a revolution, and that's been documented. And like you say, the most died after they were captured. So you think about this. Do we have people that are willing to stand up right now and do the same thing? I mean, do we have people in our congressmen? I mean, which we have all these congressmen, we have all these senators, and you think about that. Would they be willing to do what these men did?
Well, under President Trump's leadership, military enlistments are way up because we have a strong leader in President Trump who makes our enemies fear us again. Unlike Joe Biden, who nobody feared, who everyone laughed at. He was the laughingstock of every world leader. They mocked him because they knew he was mentally incapable of doing the job. He continued, Joe Biden did, to fall over himself multiple times, fell off his bike. He fell several times going up the steps to Air Force One. He mumbled, he stumbled, he bumbled. Now we have a president who commands such a strong presence that our military enlistments are way up. I do believe under President Trump, we have military personnel who would give their lives for this country. Yes, I do.
I understand that, but you think about it. These men that fought in the Revolutionary War, they were far from being military men. Most of them, like I said, most of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence were shopkeepers, farmers.
Right.
Joe Pesci said in the one movie, he said he called them our founding parents. He said they were pompous white men. But you think about it, middle-aged white men, he said. Not all of them were. Jefferson was young. Of course, Franklin was older. But you think about these things. I don't know that. I don't know that that the people in Congress would have the backbone to stand up. I don't know if the people in the Senate would have. There'd be a few. I agree. There would be a few. But I think most of them would be willing. And see, this is something that a lot of people don't know. The Tories, which that were in, and that's what we called the people that wanted to support the British Crown here that were part of the colonial, the 13 states. They wanted to stay with the British, and they actually fought with the British. So we had people that were here that fought with the British because they pretty much thought that there was no way that these farmers and shopkeepers would be able to ever stand their ground. I mean, let's face it, the British Empire at that time was second to none in the world.
Yeah, and what helped us was several things. One, the British were already fighting a war with France in Europe, so their troops were spread thin. Second, some of the British officers were brutal, and they acted in very oppressive, harsh ways, and it turned people against the British. There were people who were kind of on the fence. They didn't want to take a side. They didn't want to be with the British or the Patriots who were causing the revolution. They were kind of just riding the fence. And when they saw many officers doing harm and brutal in their tactics, it turned people against them. So one was John Simcoe. He was an officer in the British. He was brutal. There was another, I believe his name was Tarlington, was his last name.
That was
He's
right.
portrayed in the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they changed his name to Taffington, but his name was Tarlington. He was brutal. And so what they did through their harsh and brutal guerrilla warfare tactics is they turned people who were kind of neutral against the British. And then there was a third thing that helped, I guess. I said two. There was actually three. Let me correct myself. Basically, Ben Franklin was able to convince the French to get involved, and not only to help train our troops and make them more disciplined and bring money to the cause of the revolution, but to use their French ships to bottle up the British army. And that's exactly what ended up leading to the surrender that caused the end of the war. The French ships bottled up the British down there in Virginia Beach, and it ended up leading to the end of the war. And naturally after that, our founding fathers gave us the greatest document of all mankind, which is a constitutional republic in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights. And what they said was the power of government comes from the consent of the people. So our rulers have their power to rule only as far as we allow them. So our rulers, Congress, and so on, those in all the various bureaus and agencies and departments, their power comes from us. And that's something we have forgotten.
You're exactly right. It's from we the people. That's what it says. We the people. I mean, let's think about it. If you're not, the Bible actually even speaks to this. I don't know the verse I don't know the book in the chapter, but in the verse, but it says, Christ said, if you're not hot or cold, I spew you out of my mouth. And that's what these Tories were. They wanted to try to ride the fence. And when you're riding the fence, you're it don't work. You're just, there's nothing that when you're not going to take a side either way, you're a Tory. And that's what I say.
Yeah, you're referring to a reference in the book of Revelation. I don't remember chapter and verse where Jesus said, "You can't be lukewarm. If you are, I'll spew you from my mouth." That's what he was saying. You have to take a side. In other words, you can't play this neutral game when it comes to God or Satan. You have to choose a side. Going back to our constitutional republic, it's also important to know our founders made it abundantly clear in the Bill of Rights that those rights come from God, not government. If government gives us rights, then government can easily take them away. But if our rights come from God, which the Founding Fathers said they did, and they were correct, if our rights come from God, then the role of government isn't to give and take away rights. The role of government is to protect and defend the God-given rights spelled out in the Bill of Rights, and that's the purpose. Did you realize that since the Bill of Rights was written, about 200 years ago, a little more, do you realize that in that time, we've only had 27 changes to the Constitution in more than 200 years? Think about that, John. Less than 30 changes or amendments, to our Constitution. We have the first 10 Bill of Rights, and then 17 amendments after that. So since the Bill of Rights was written, the first 10, there's only been 17 more amendments to the Constitution in more than 200 years. That's insane. That's amazing. What that tells us is the Constitution is not supposed to be a living document that changes over time, as our progressive friends, our liberal friends claim. For if the Constitution is a changing document, an evolving document, then why is it so difficult to add amendments to the Constitution?
It's the only country that has a document that gives the power to the people instead of the elite, and that's what I think I think that's, Chris, me and you spoke about this too. I think that's what we've got away from in our country, where we think that because somebody is been elected, I'll say it, 17 times to Congress, they should have more power than the people that voted them in, and that's not true.
Well, I think it's obvious that since government has grown exponentially over the last 100 years or so, since the days of Woodrow Wilson, as government, the federal government becomes bigger and the state government becomes bigger, then the people begin to become more dependent on the federal and state governments and less responsible and accountable for themselves. And so one of the, I would say, the worst problems caused by a big federal government isn't just the cost of debt and deficits, that's a big one, but also big government, when people rely too much on big government, it destroys the sense of community at the local level. People no longer look to their friends and neighbors to solve problems because they're waiting for the federal government to give them another bailout, right? Another stimulus check. So rather than work with our neighbors and our community to fix problems at the local level, we've been conditioned to think the federal government is supposed to bail us out with another stimulus check and another bailout and so on, another program, instead of the people doing it for themselves. Now, recently, the Democrats claimed that President Trump had violated his oath of office and misused his power. Of course, it wasn't true. The Supreme Court struck that all down. And they said that President Trump, all the things he's doing, rounding up illegal immigrants and deporting them and so on, that this is well within his constitutional authority by way of Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. But it got me thinking. I find it ironic, John, that the Democrats and the Democrat Party of today would claim that Trump, President Trump, is abusing his authority when in fact he's not, and the Supreme Court upheld the fact that he is not abusing his authority. Meanwhile, there's a long list, John, of Democrat presidents who have misused their power and violated the Constitution, and I'm sure you know that.
I do.
Yes.
We can start.
So I have a list here. I'm sorry?
We probably can start with way back.
Yes. Excellent. Very well said. Going back to the very first Democrat president, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a racist, well-known racist. He purchased land in what would be Alabama and Mississippi, and he sold it, made a big profit. And as part of the condition of his sale of Alabama and Mississippi, he made sure that whoever purchased the land that he sold in what is now Alabama and Mississippi, that they had to put cotton farms and cotton fields on the land, and they had to have slaves. He made sure this was a stipulation of the sale of that land. He wanted slaves to pick cotton. He mandated this when he sold the land. But he also did something brutal. While president, he forced Native American people off of their lands in states like Louisiana, Georgia, I think parts of Florida as well. And he made these Native Americans walk all the way to Oklahoma and put them on a reservation. He stole their land out from underneath them. And during this walk from Louisiana, Georgia, and I believe parts of Florida, 16,000 of these Native Americans, men, women, and children, died as a result of Andrew Jackson stealing their land and forcing them to walk all the way to Oklahoma. Do you know what this was called?
It was called the Trail of Tears.
Yes, sir. The Native Americans called it the Trail of Tears. The first Democrat president forced the Trail of Tears on the Native American people, killing 16,000. This is nothing short of genocide. Compare this with the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who freed slaves, who helped push the bill through Congress to create an amendment and end slavery. And he also helped push that along with his executive orders as well during the Civil War. He did everything he could to end slavery, and he died for it. He was shot by John Wilkes Booth, who, by the way, was a Southern Democrat. So let's go to Woodrow Wilson. Do you know what Democrat Woodrow Wilson did to violate the Constitution and law?
When I studied, I do like history, and I was always very good at it. But one of the things, what did they call World War I? Do you remember what they called what most of the people?
The Great War.
No, they called it Wilson's War.
Oh, that's true.
They called it Wilson's War. And like I said, there was the Canadians was already involved in that, and that was kind of like, there's some other things that pulled it into us. But actually, once again, we went and helped the French out. And, of course, they helped us get our country going, so I guess we felt like we still owed them. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I think we did feel like we owed the French because of their support for us in the Revolution. Okay, so the very first progressive Democrat president, the first Democrat to call himself a progressive and be president, was Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson during World War I, by the way, Wilson lied about World War I when he ran in 1912. Then he had to run again in 1916, and during re-election, he said he would not get us into World War I, but behind the scenes he was already preparing us for war. So he blatantly lied there. But he also, and this is the unconstitutional illegal act of Woodrow Wilson, the first progressive Democrat president. Wilson arrested journalists and reporters that wrote stories against him. He then had them placed in jail. So he violated the constitutional rights of journalists and reporters simply because they wrote stories against him. And this is appalling. And those reporters and journalists did not get out of jail until President Calvin Coolidge, the Republican, pardoned them all. Now you move to Democrat President FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. He issued an executive order, which was Executive Order 9066. He removed all Japanese Americans. These were American citizens. He removed them from their homes and properties, placed them in prison camps. And they lost their homes, they lost their jobs, they were separated from their families. This was completely unconstitutional, but, he got away with it. So I've already named two, right? Actually three, make that three. Andrew Jackson, Wilson, and FDR. We never hear Democrats talking about the violations of the constitutional rights of Americans committed by these three Democrat presidents. I'll give you three more. Democrat President Lyndon Johnson lied about the Gulf of Tonkin incident twice. It was all a lie. It never happened. He claimed American ships were being attacked, and that justified the massive buildup for the Vietnam conflict, but it never happened. He made it up. And then he went to war in Vietnam without congressional approval. He violated the law and the Constitution. And then Jimmy Carter, this is number 5, this is another Democrat, violated the law and the Constitution. He undermined the Shah of Iran, who was a friend of the USA. The Shah of Iran allowed for freedom for women and men there. He was allowing for Western society to have its way in their culture. Women could vote, women could dress how they want, they could drive, and so on. He let that all be taken away by placing in power this Ayatollah Khomeini. Ever since he's done that, Iran has been a leading sponsor of terrorism ever since, and also Carter violated the law again by creating FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, without congressional approval. He issued a executive order and created an agency within our federal government without Congress's approval. And there's more, but I'll give you the most egregious examples. This is number 6. President Obama bombed 5 nations and never reported to Congress. He violated the War Powers Act of 1973. The War Powers Act of 1973 said that a president can take military action so long as he reports to Congress within 48 hours. Well, Obama bombed all 5 of these nations and never once reported to Congress. And on top of that, one of the men killed by Obama's bombings was an American citizen, and his due process rights were violated because he was killed without ever having his day in court. So these are just 6 examples of 6 Democrat presidents who blatantly and egregiously violated the Constitution and the law. John, have you ever heard of the Democrats or the media complaining about any of these Democrat presidents?
Definitely not the media. Definitely not.
No. So they went after Trump, claiming he violated the Constitution and his authority. The Supreme Court slapped that down and said, no, he did not. So Trump has been operating within the law, within the Constitution. I find it absolutely hypocritical that I just named 6, and there's more. I'm sure I could find more if I dug deeper. Democrat presidents who violated the Constitution and the law, and we never hear a thing, not one word, from the media or the Democrat Party about these Democrat presidents who completely violated the Constitution.
Well, here we are again. And we'll have to we have to figure out. Not we have to figure out, but back to the founding fathers. You think about what you just said and how people violated the Constitution, but they're trying to make it out that Donald Trump was the one that he's the most pertinent. And actually, he did report to Congress within 48 hours. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely, he did. He reported to Congress and let them know what he was doing within the War Powers Act of 1973 after he took those bombing strikes against Iran.
Well, Chris, where do we head from here? I mean, do you think we have? I believe I have all faith in our military. I believe that our veterans should be number one, first off in our hearts and all of our prayers. Because if it wasn't for them, well, there wouldn't be no United States of America. They've protected us over the years many times, and I think that we need to do a better job of taking care of our vets, no matter what happens. I mean, we did a pitiful job with and that's probably kindly saying it. There are vets from Vietnam. I mean, it was sinful. It was sinful how we've treated these men, and now we're back. Now we have the Gulf Wars, and of course, just what happened in Israel and Iran. I really believe our president did the right thing on this. I really feel that way. So we're not putting boots on the ground. So it's making it's where we need to be. We don't need another. We definitely don't need definitely don't need another proxy war. We've already spent how many billions of dollars into Ukraine, and where has that got us?
Oh, absolutely. And imagine if George W. Bush had done what Trump did. Maybe take some military strikes at Iraq and Afghanistan, and then applied economic sanctions so they would, cough up bin Laden. What if he had done that and not sent military ground troops, into two different wars? That might have worked better.
We've spent 40 minutes here.
Oh, wow.
So, hey, I appreciate it. I thank you for all your input. We'll be talking soon. You've been a great advisor of mine, and I want to thank you for everything you've done. So,
well, thank you for having me on your show.